Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Love and Respect Marriage Conference, and it's entitled The Crazy Cycle. And I just want to say I'm impressed with the few of you that did make it out and brave this cold weather. I think that 32 degrees is going to feel really warm in about a week when the weather warms up. So I want to welcome those of you that are tuning in online. Those of you that are here will probably have received our booklet, and those of you that are online and are tuning in right now, you can actually download the PDF. There's a link in the comments section of the YouTube. Oh, that's right, the description of the YouTube video. And so you can also write in the comments if you're having a hard time with it, and we'll just send that link to you in the comments section. So welcome to all of you, and I just want to, before we begin, explain how we're going to do our 3 sessions together. So in addition to the booklet, you must have received also a schedule that looks like this. And so you'll notice that this is a 3-part series, and we're actually combining sessions 2 and 3 into one part, because it's normally a 4-session. If you look at your booklet, there are 4 sessions in your booklet. So we took sessions 2 and 3 from the booklet, combined them into one, and that will be tomorrow morning at 11. And then our final session will be tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. And so tonight is entitled, What is the Crazy Cycle? And then tomorrow we'll get into some of the aspects of the crazy cycle, and the 4th session will be Breaking the Crazy Cycle. So, welcome, and for those of you that are new to Love and Respect, Emerson Eggerichs is the founder and speaker and director of this ministry. And Emerson Eggerichs has a passion for helping people in their marriages. When he was 2.5 years of age, he watched his dad almost strangle his mom. And that had a major impact in his life. And he witnessed many incidents of chaos like that growing up. When he was 11, he learned that his dad was committing adultery. His parents divorced, they remarried, then separated again. And as an adult, he felt called by God to help couples understand why they fight and how to stop hurting each other. So I can relate to Emerson's childhood experience. Growing up, maybe not as traumatic or chaotic, but I grew up in a home where there was a lot of fighting. And when Melissa and I got married at the age of 24, and by the way, I'm so glad to have my beautiful wife up here with me, Melissa, for those of you that don't know her. And she and I got married at the age of 24, and we kind of thought that we were going to have, a trouble-free marriage. We saw things growing up in our home, and we were determined that we were going to break the cycle. And very soon into our marriage experience, we realized it's not as easy as we thought it was going to be. Now, we have a great marriage, and I'm so grateful that she is with me up here, and she's willing for us to share some of our story as we interact through this conference. But I tell you, it's not as easy as we thought, is it, for those of us that are married? No matter how good we have it, there are bumps in the road, and we all experience what we're going to learn about tonight, which is this thing that he calls the crazy cycle. Well, one of our wedding gifts, our first year of marriage, was the book Love and Respect, and I'm going to be talking more about it tomorrow. But we got introduced to this series, this conference, this material right on our honeymoon. We read it, and it was a great blessing to us. It's not a silver bullet to assure or guarantee a trouble-free marriage, but it really has been a blessing to us. So we're up here just simply to share with you that this resource, this tool, has enhanced our lives, it's enhanced our family, our marriage, and we hope that it will be a blessing to you as we go through this journey together the next 2 days. So at this time, I'm just going to play a 15-minute video that will introduce you to this idea of the Crazy Cycle, which is the title of our conference. This is a Christian conference. This whole concept of love and respect in marriage is based on the Bible. And so we will pray together. And so I'm going to invite you to bow your heads wherever you are. And let's pray and ask God to be with us as we go through this. Father in heaven, we're thankful this evening that you've brought us together, some in person, some online, to learn together, learn from one another. And Father, I just pray that as we learn from Dr. Eggerich's experience, learn from your word about love and respect and our needs and our mate's needs, I pray that your Spirit will teach us and be with us and fill our hearts with this understanding of how to minister to our spouse and how to relate to one another. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. At this time, I'm going to play a video for you, and I'm just going to get this set up here, and here we go. After this 15-minute video, which introduces the Crazy Cycle, we'll have some time to debrief and talk about it and interact a little bit.
Meet Brad. They've been married for a while now, and like many couples, they don't always see eye to eye. They love each other, but conflicts arise and small misunderstandings escalate into what seems like a never-ending back and forth. Soon they're feeling angry, hurt, and resentful. They sit alone and wonder, how did we get here? Welcome to the Crazy Cycle. We all know that we should love our spouse, but many of us are unaware of the specific needs that God has built into men and women. He created women with a deep longing to feel loved. And in men, he put a strong desire for respect. When a husband doesn't feel respected by his wife, he reacts in unloving ways. And when a wife doesn't feel loved, she responds without respect. It's the Crazy Cycle. Our needs aren't met, so we respond negatively, hoping somehow it will change our spouse for the better. And a loving relationship descends into strife and distrust. Fortunately, God shows us a way to resist this downward spiral. In Ephesians, husbands are commanded to love their wives, and wives to respect their husbands. And just as Christ loves us unconditionally, we are to give love and respect at all times, whether we feel our spouse deserves it or not. As we put them first, we begin to recognize that their complaints are often a plea for love or respect. We trust that they are good-willed people, that even in moments of anger or selfishness, they want the marriage to flourish. This is how we end the Crazy Cycle, with a conscious commitment to love our wives, to respect our husbands no matter what. Brad and Jessica may not always see eye to eye, but they've broken out of the Crazy Cycle by living in accordance with God's good design.
Have you ever had a conflict with your spouse when suddenly the issue didn't seem to be the issue and you saw their spirit deflate? I like to ask the question, what is the issue when the issue isn't the issue? You know, years ago when Sarah and I were first married, we went from Chicago down to Peoria, Illinois, where my parents lived. It was during the summer, and at that time I wore contact lens, and we drove 3 hours, got there, I'm going to bed that night, and I realized I forgot my contact lens case. And so I thought, well, I've got to improvise here. So I went and got 2 juice glasses. I got up in the morning, poured the water out, put the contact in, got the other juice glass, poured the water out, and there is no contact. I mean, it's not on the lip of the glass, it's nowhere. It is, I looked everywhere. And so I go out, Sarah's with my mom and dad, and I said, Sarah, did you do something with one of those juice glasses last night? had him on the back of the toilet? She said, no, I did. She said, I did. I got up in the middle of the night and I took a pill. She drank my contact lens. She drank it. I couldn't believe it. I said, I can't believe that you drank my contact lens. She said, well, I can't believe that you would put your contact lens in a juice glass on the back of the toilet. I said, well, I can't believe that you drink out of a juice glass on the back of a toilet. We were having this heated fellowship moment. We were going back and forth in front of my mom and dad, and Sarah's feeling a little embarrassed. I'm coming at her at this moment, and it's heated. And suddenly, Sarah's spirit begins to deflate. And at that point in time, the issue wasn't about the contact lens. Something else was going on in her heart. And it took me a while as a newly married guy to begin to figure out, but I certainly knew that the issue wasn't the issue. Something else was happening in Sarah's spirit, but I didn't quite know exactly what that was. So I began to think, what is the issue when the issue isn't the issue? Several months later, it's Christmas, and we're coming from Chicago down to Peoria again, and Sarah's a farm girl from Indiana. She's a Hoosier. She's on a farm, 2,000 acres, and she can do it all. She can cook, she can, she does it all. She sews, and she made me a special gift. I didn't know it was a special thing that she had made. It was a jean jacket. She had done it all by hand, put it all together, and it was that last special Christmas gift on Christmas morn. She was so excited about it, and so we'd already opened up all the presents, and now came this moment where she hands me this special gift, and I'm very excited, and I open it up. It's a jean jacket, and I put it on, and I say thank you, and I'm getting a feel for it. She's watching me, and suddenly she says, you don't like it. I said, I do like it. And I'm continuing to test it out, button it up, and she said, you don't like it. I said, I do like it. And then I continued to look at it, start to take it off. She said, you don't like it. I said, Sarah, why are you saying that I don't like this jean jacket? Because she said, in my family, when we like something, we go, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I said, in my family, we say thank you. But at a certain point, my spirit deflated. And I wasn't totally in tune with it at that time, but I've since come to the realization of what was going on. I just kind of withdrew and just sank, deflated. And I began to analyze that this kind of thing goes on with many couples. It perhaps goes on with you. Perhaps you've had that experience this week, this month. You just sense the issue isn't the issue. The issue's real. The contact lens is real. The jean jacket is real, but it's not the root issue any longer. This series is going to answer the question, what is that issue when the issue isn't the issue?
We got married really young. I was 21, he was 22. So there's some immaturity when you first get married, and there were just a lot of areas where we were missing each other.
So we found ourselves constantly arguing, and a lot of it had to do with, we've got 4 kids. We would talk over one another. We weren't out to understand the other one's perspective. We were just out to be heard.
For example, there was one time years ago, I was talking to Jason and felt like we'd had some tension happening in our marriage, and it had come to a point where we were gonna have this big conversation. And I had kind of gotten up the courage to reveal a whole lot of stuff to him that was pretty deep and personal, so I was being really vulnerable.
She was very emotional in this moment. She was pouring her heart out. And the one thing I didn't want to do was be emotional in return, and somehow now this is about me.
I was trying to be respectful by allowing him to kind of take the reins and respond.
I wanted her to have the ability to just say what she needed to say and not be a catalyst to make it any worse. So I just didn't say anything and thought it was great.
He doesn't say anything, and he doesn't say anything. So I just get up and go get ready for bed, and that's the end of it. And I was so hurt. A few days have gone by now. He came home for lunch from work, and was like, hey, I just wanted to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, here it comes. We're going to talk about this. And he says, I just think that was so mature of us that you could say what you needed to say, and I was able to listen. Like, he thought we had done this, like made this huge leap in our marriage, and I thought like our marriage was ending because we were on such different pages. He allowed me to then share with him why that made me feel hurt and unloved. He listened to me, and he hugged me, and that helped me feel that reassurance that, in fact, our marriage was not ending.
The goal wasn't supposed to be me not saying anything so we win. It was supposed to be me hearing what she's saying so that I understand what's going on and understand that hurt and that pain so that we can deal with that and I can help her. We've progressed in life to learning better ways to avoid the crazy cycle or better ways to jump out of it when it's happened. Sometimes I have to ask her what it is she needs so that I can give her love well.
Years back, I made a discovery in the Bible that just kind of blew me away. I had the privilege of studying the Bible 30 hours a week for nearly 20 years as a pastor of a church in East Lansing, Michigan. And I was meditating in Ephesians 5, in fact, actually on verse 33, which is the summary statement to the greatest treatise in the New Testament on marriage. Most would say Ephesians 5 is that classic passage on husband-wife relationships, and verse 33 is the summary. It is as though this is God's last word to the church on marriage. You know, if my dad was dying, he was on his deathbed, and he said, Emerson, come close, come close. You know that the last words of a dying individual are the most important. It's going to come deep from his soul, and he intends for it to go deep into my soul. Well, in a sense, Abba Father has given us his last words to the church on marriage. He's not dying, but in effect, he's saying, come close, church, come close, listen to me. And if you listen to me, everything's going to be okay in your marriage. Everything is going to be okay. Well, what are those last words? Here it is. A husband must love his wife, and a wife must respect her husband. As I was meditating on husbands must love, agape love, this is the Greek word there, and the wives are to respect, I thought to myself, what happens when a wife feels unloved? I'll bet she reacts in ways that feel disrespectful to her husband. What happens when a husband feels disrespected? I'll bet he reacts in ways that feel unloving to her. And suddenly I thought, whoa, without love, she reacts without respect he reacts without love, she reacts without respect, and this baby starts to spin. And I called it the crazy cycle. And over the last 15 years, I've shared just that information with people, and I don't know how many people have said, in 2 minutes, you've described 30 years of my marriage. And this is exactly what happens. When the spirit of an individual deflates, most often the wife is feeling unloved, and most often the husband is feeling disrespected. Now, I need to interject here. The true need for love and respect is equal. He needs L-O-V-E. She needs R-E-S-P-E-C-T. We're not debating the true need. But what we are talking about is the difference between men and women during conflict with regard to a felt need. The felt need is different. We've asked 7,000 people this question. When you're in a conflict with your spouse, do you feel unloved at that moment or disrespected? Get this, 83% of the men, 83% said they feel disrespected. 72% of the women say they feel unloved. That's as different as pink is from blue. The wife is not commanded in the New Testament to agape love her husband. Only the husband is commanded to agape love. That's that unconditional, God-like love. Women love, they just love to love at the level of intimacy. So he's not going to command them to do that. And most husbands during conflict know that the wife loves him. He doesn't lack that unless she has said, I don't love you. But he does think that she doesn't like him, that she doesn't respect him. And she'll even say, I love you, but I don't respect you. And even though a woman needs respect, if you show her disrespect week after week after week, she begins to say, how can you say you love me and treat me disrespectfully? So it begins to go that direction. Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts without love, and this baby spins. Have you had that experience? This is what I believe is the issue when the issue isn't the issue. Is this true? Hollywood certainly would say it. There isn't one movie that ends with the hero embracing the damsel and saying, I want to respect you the rest of my life. There's not one card in the card history from a husband to wife that says, baby, I really respect you. This is a felt need that's different. So here's my question to you. Have you had a conflict recently when the issue didn't seem to be the issue and you saw the spirit of your spouse deflate? We believe you're getting on the crazy cycle because, right or wrong, she's feeling unloved and he's feeling disrespected. That's what's going on. How are you going to deal with that? As we continue the series, we're going to tell you how to deal with those moments.
I hope you can relate. I know we can, and we're so grateful for those of you that are tuning in online, and some of you have just recently tuned in, so I just want to repeat an announcement I made earlier. There is a workbook that goes with this series, and it's available to you if you just go on the description section of our YouTube video that you're watching. There's a link to the PDF of the workbook, and we're actually not going to be following the workbook line by line as we go through the session. There is an excellent discussion questions section that I would encourage you at the end of the session when you're home with your spouse to actually go through and look at those discussion questions together as a couple, and you'll get a lot out of it. And as you're watching the videos that we'll be sharing in the sessions, you don't actually have to be filling anything out in the workbook, but the workbook is there as just supplementary material. It basically just gives you the highlights that we're going to be going through the video and the discussions that follow. So we just heard Dr. Eggerichs explain what is happening when we are struggling in our relationship with our spouse, when the issue that we're fighting about isn't really the issue. And so what is that issue? And he calls it the crazy cycle. And this is when I am depriving my wife of her needs, and she is depriving me of my needs. And so Eggerichs bases this whole concept on Paul's words to the Ephesians in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33, where he basically gives two separate commands. He commands the wife to respect her husband, and he commands the husband to love the wife. And so why those two separate commands? And so according to Dr. Eggerichs, men and women have distinct needs, and when we deprive our spouse of those needs, we react negatively to each other. And so let's repeat the crazy cycle, and let's make sure that we understand. Without love, she reacts without respect. And without respect, he reacts without love. That's the crazy cycle. We are in this dynamic where we are depriving each other of our needs, and sometimes we think subconsciously that by depriving her of her needs, somehow I'm going to get her to do what I want her to do. Somehow I'm going to have my needs met by depriving her. So by being unloving towards her, somehow that's going to make her treat me better, and vice versa. That's what he means by the crazy cycle. So we're going to break this down basically by sharing with you a few stories, and we'd love to hear some of your stories as well. So Melissa is going to be following the YouTube channel, and there's going to be a chat session there. So if you're online, or even if you're here at the church and you want to just go on our YouTube channel and make some comments, share some questions that we'll get to at the end. This is designed to be interactive. We're not going to be having comments from the floor because of our online audience. Although tomorrow afternoon in our last session, we will have some interaction with microphone. And so we'd love to hear some of your stories, some of your experiences that might illustrate the crazy cycle. But our goal is to break the crazy cycle. And we're going to be talking about that throughout the weekend. So what happens when he feels disrespected. I want to tell you what I do. And you know, a lot of times we're generalizing. Not every couple goes through this in the way that he describes. But I tell you, for me, and I think for Melissa as well, it fits pretty well. When I feel disrespected, I withdraw. Silence. My withdrawal, of course, is going to be interpreted as unloving, right? Because at least Melissa, and you can expound on this, you want to talk about it, right? Whenever there's an issue, you don't want there to be silence. You want us to be able to resolve before we go to bed, right? And so my withdrawal, because I feel maybe disrespected in some way, maybe it's what I would interpret as nagging, you know, what I do a lot, which definitely upsets Melissa, and she'll expound on this in just a moment. I go and get a drink of water, and I leave the glass on the counter, and then I go and get another drink of water, and then another glass, and the glasses sometimes accumulate, and sometimes I'm so consumed with life and thoughts about other things, I'm not even thinking about it, and she's asked me to make sure you use the same glass and wash your glass, because I like to see my counter clean. I like to see the sink empty of dishes. And so the fact that I'm not paying attention to that is interpreted as unloving, because if I really care for her, I would do the things that she desires. And so what I would interpret as nagging or a complaint leads me to withdraw in an attempt to protect myself from being disrespected. Okay, now this is a minor thing that happens in our home. We're just using a real example of a minor conflict, because remember, the issue that we think is the issue is not the issue, right? And these minor things eventually lead to bigger challenges, bigger fights, if you will. But what's happening when I withdraw and there's silence, it's interpreted as unloving, because the loving thing to do is, let's talk about it. Let's figure this out. In an attempt to protect myself, I withdraw, and I think I'm protecting the marriage by avoiding conflict, while she deflates because she just wants to talk about it. So her complaint, while interpreted as disrespect, is a plea for love. My withdrawal, interpreted as unloving, is my desire to keep the peace and to protect myself. This is what happens. So we're going to talk a little bit about our honeymoon, and I'm going to let Melissa get into it, because I know you all want to hear from her. I can't do all the talking. But Melissa and I, we thought we knew each other pretty well when we got married. Like I said, we felt like, we're going into this fully equipped. We went to a Christian college. We both studied for the ministry. We were both in ministry, came from homes where we saw a lot of conflict, and we had a really good premarital course, which really we do to this day feel like equipped us very well. We got the Love and Respect book, and we were reading it together. But there were three things that happened on our honeymoon that kind of already gave us a glimpse that marriage isn't as easy as we thought. So, Melissa, you worked really hard to get our honeymoon prepared. We had just a great place. And so tell us about our honeymoon.
Oh, I think this is to illustrate also partly how many expectations we bring in, and it's rare that we speak our expectations, right? We just have these expectations, and of course, the way we grow up also influences things that we just take for granted. And so our honeymoon was short. We spent 3 or 4 days at a bed and breakfast at the foot of the Shenandoah, the Blue Ridge Mountains in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. And so I'm picturing us taking 1-hour hikes up the top of the mountain with like waterfalls And
In your family, you all did. A walk in your family is,
so in my family growing up, when we take a short walk, we take a 1-hour walk. When we go for a regular walk, we walk for 2 or 3 hours. To this day, my father, he walks 2 hours every day. When it's real bitter cold, he walks less, but he walks every day. And so I took for granted, and in Diego's mind, I soon came to find out 15 minutes was a long walk.
well, in my family, we walk to the car, we walk to the grocery store. Exercise is playing basketball or running. But for me, this idea of you go for a long hike in nature wasn't
Was
common
foreign.
growing up.
And so, we went on a walk. We walked about 15 minutes to the foot of the trail. And then he's like, let's sit and let's hang out. And then he's like, okay, let's go back. We're done. We had a nice walk. And I don't think I knew how to voice the expectation or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there were 3 things. Another thing was you prepared a number of documentaries that you were excited that we were going to watch together during our downtime in the room, and I was excited about them too. And then you put on the documentaries. I was enjoying the documentaries, but what happens when I enjoy watching something?
He just puts him to sleep.
Yeah.
The better the documentary, the faster he goes to sleep.
Yeah, so I'm falling asleep. How does that look to her? You know, how excited do I look about the documentary she planned for us to watch? There were several of them, and they were all great. And we eventually did watch all of them in their entirety during our first year of marriage, but we hardly got through one. I guess I was so tired from those 15-minute walks. I needed to sleep. And so growing up, I had a television in my room, and I would just put myself to sleep watching television. So to this day, if I'm watching something good and it's past 8, I'm falling asleep. Whereas Melissa
It wakes me up.
keeps her awake. So we cannot really watch anything past 8. I love watching things a little later. For her, it has to be early because watching something will keep her up till midnight. And so another thing that caused a little bit of a challenge during our honeymoon time, because really it was a whole month. It was 3 days at the bed and breakfast, but then we were going to spend some time in Canada.
We traveled visiting family. So we had the wedding in Virginia, then we were going to move to, he was living in Brazil, and then I was going to move to Brazil. And so we had a month, we had 3 days at the bed and breakfast, and we spent a month visiting family members and preaching in churches.
I was involved with administration in my work in Brazil. I was one of the leaders of an institution, and people were calling, there were emails to answer, and during those 3 days at that beautiful bed and breakfast with all those beautiful plans you made, I'm sometimes answering an email. I had to run to the bank.
Well, what happened was the night of our wedding, we arrived at the bed and breakfast 10 p.m., and we opened the door, and the lady says, there's an emergency phone call from Brazil. And we hadn't even told anyone where we were staying, and so I was like, how did they even find us?
One of the vehicles of the institution had been apprehended, and long story short, they needed my signature. Only my signature was going to
Release it.
solve the problem, release the vehicle from the hands of the authorities, and every day that it was there was going to cost so much, and so it was an emergency, at least from their perspective, it was an emergency. And so, again, this does not feel very loving, because if you love me, you're going to put your all into this time, and the truth is, it's true. I mean, looking back, I would do my honeymoon so differently. We had a good honeymoon. I mean, those were just little things that we didn't talk about even till later. There was no fight in the honeymoon. It was just things that as we reflect, we were like, wow, we thought it was just going to be like this. And it turned out that it caused just those little disappointments early on. But then our first year in Brazil.
But I was going to say, what happens sometimes is it's not always a big fight, but you have these little deflating moments, and then those accumulate, and then that can cause, then something else can happen, and then it's like, it boils over, because then everything's accumulated, and then something small happens, and then you kind of make it to a big thing because you've been accumulating these feelings.
That's right. So our first year in Brazil. Now, just appreciate this for just a moment. Melissa is from Canada. grew up speaking French, English. She learned Portuguese in 3 months. She learned Portuguese before we got married and even moved to Brazil. Her Portuguese was really good. Within 3 months living in Brazil, she was speaking so fluently that people didn't even know she was a foreigner. They thought she was from the south of Brazil. She had an accent, but not a Rio accent. And so I was really excited because I could tell her transition to Brazil was just going to be so smooth. I mean, she learned Portuguese. She is just amazing at adapting to different cultures. She is so smart. She's got computer skills. She's just going to, she was going to work at the institution, and her department was different than mine, but I just knew she was going to do great. And so what was that first month like in Brazil for you?
It was really hard, the adaptation. I didn't know how to use a phone. Like, I couldn't make a phone call because it's totally different the way they'd use number, how to dial out, like the number of numbers on a number. And you're like, what's the area code? What's the long distance? And I just remember being really frustrated because I felt so, I'm not sure what the word is, but I felt like I couldn't do things, and I felt like he needed to help me adapt more, and he's like, you're doing fine, you don't need any help.
You felt dependent.
Yeah, I did feel dependent.
Yeah, and you were used to being independent as far as those basic things.
Yeah.
Driving, making phone calls. The culture, even though we knew you were going to adapt well to the culture, there were some cultural adaptations, and I kind of made some assumptions that you just figured out, and I wasn't as attentive to your needs. That led to?
So I think it's a good thing to point out, for example, he wasn't doing that to be unloving, but it felt like he didn't care. Like, you just kind of sink or swim, I'm throwing you in the deep end, you'll figure it out. But it's feel loving. So then, sometimes then I would get snappy because I felt stressed, and so then if I get snappy to him, then he's withdrawing more. And so then I'm feeling like he's more far away. And so
one of the things that Emerson stresses is that most of the time we're not intending to be unloving or disrespectful. Right. Is that clear? Like, good-willed people, and I believe we're all good-willed people. He uses that phrase a lot. People that are good-willed, they're not marrying that person thinking, how am I going to make their lives miserable? How am I going to hurt them? And so most of this talk of being unloving and disrespectful is unconscious lack of love and unconscious lack of respect. You're not thinking, I'm going to intentionally deprive her of love so that she will meet my needs and vice versa. But it happens anyways. It's a perception. And so what happened one day at work, something that made me feel disrespected. Of course, I don't know what's going on in her mind fully. I'm beginning to see that, okay, there's some frustration here, but we're still learning to communicate. We thought we knew each other really well, but no matter how well you think you know your mate, once you get married, you're going to find out there are 1,000 things and more, and we're still learning to this day, right, about each other. But one day it boiled over, a moment of frustration, and she didn't do anything drastic. She didn't yell or, say something mean, but she responded in a way that made me feel embarrassed in front of a coworker. Again, if you were to see it, nothing big, you'd think nothing of it. But to me, it felt like I was being disrespected because any of you ladies, some of you watching online, have you ever embarrassed your husband in public? Or maybe you don't know. Men, have you ever felt embarrassed, disrespected? Maybe it's a critique. Like sometimes the wife will say something about her husband to friends, and he's there, and he's not reacting negatively, but inside he's like, man, can she just stop saying this? And so I think that one thing that men sometimes feel, this makes a man feel disrespected, is when he is embarrassed in front of peers by their spouse. And and they're not trying to be disrespectful. On that day, all Melissa was trying to do was communicate to me, I don't know how to make this phone call. And she was just simply communicating her need, but it was like, embarrassing, the way it was done and in front of whom it was done. And so that led to withdrawal. It led to what Emerson calls being secretly mad at her. Now, another thing that happened our first year of marriage, which is interesting, again, this illustrates how we don't know each other as well as we thought, and we bring to our marriage expectations based on how we grew up and what we saw in our parents. Mealtime. Mealtime for Melissa growing up was very different in my home. Mealtime was, my mom would leave the food on the stove, everybody would go and get their food, and I would just go to my room and watch whatever I was watching. There was no this sit down together as a family and have a meal, whereas what was mealtime at your home like?
Yeah, we sat down and talked a lot.
There was a lot of talking. Sometimes you'd sit hour and a half.
Well, even in the French Canadian culture, if you have people over, you sit at the table and you spend 2 hours at the table, because even when the food's done, you just stay there and talk and talk and talk. Meal time is talk time.
So what was mealtime like our first couple months?
He can't stand talking while he's eating. He doesn't like. And so at first it comes like, for me, it was hard to overcome that fact that that's just how we grew up. It just felt so, it felt like he was upset all the time, because he just had nothing to say and he didn't want to talk. And so I think part of how understanding the crazy cycle, though, helped us a lot is these concepts of the goodwill, understanding people don't do things to hurt. And around that time, we had a talk and we said, we have to always assume the best intentions, right? If you're coming across upset, I have to assume that you're not upset at me unless you say so, specifically.
Mm-hmm. But it felt like I was upset, right?
Still felt like it, but
yeah, because
trying
I
to
was
overcome
quiet.
the feeling.
I was quiet during mealtime, and on my end of things, a lot of times I would come home for lunch because we lived right there on the campus of the institution, so it was a walk from the office to the house, and my mind was just on work. I was very immersed in my work at the time, probably more than our whole married life. That first year of marriage was also my most stressful year of work. And I would come home for lunch and I would just be like playing in my mind, what happened that morning, what I needed to do in the afternoon, and just thinking about work. Not to mention the fact that mealtime at our home was never about fellowship and talking. And I have to admit, today, I'm so thankful that Melissa brought these values and these habits to our family. And we do meals in our home today more like the way she was used to growing up. And we've kind of met each other halfway. There are times, though, when we'll be having lunch and I'll say, can we just watch this documentary? I've been meaning to catch up on the news, and we'll just have a quiet meal where we're just all sitting at the table and we're watching a clip of something or the news. But anyways, that first year of marriage, I'd be sitting there and I was not upset at her. I wasn't thinking about, I'm angry because of what she did. It was just because I was consumed. But hey, she's never spent 24 hours with me 7 days a week until now. So now she's getting to know me and seeing quiet moments that she didn't see when we were dating. And those quiet moments felt like, hey, is he angry? Is he upset about something?
But it's really just to show that some things that in and of themselves were never meant to be hurtful can become a real problem. It's like that proverbial, fights over the toothpaste in the bathroom. You hear about she squeezes at the middle and he squeezes at the end. The issue is not really the toothpaste. The issue is how people are feeling and how they let the feelings get worse and worse, and this snowball effect that then has a negative effect on your relationship.
Very well. Well, I want to throw out a couple of questions for you as we bring today's session to a close. And by the way, tomorrow, 11:30-ish, for our church service is when we'll be doing the next session. And we're going to be talking about her needs, unconditional love. In other words, no matter how disrespected I may feel, love must be extended to her unconditionally. His needs unconditional respect. No matter how unloving he may be, her response should always be one of respect, even if it means disagreement. That's going to be our session tomorrow. But I want to throw out a couple of questions. So Egrich's whole thesis, this whole seminar is based on this idea that Paul commands husbands to love their wives and wives to respect their husbands. And this is a command found in Scripture, and Paul is the one writing. And so he talks about women respecting their husbands and husbands loving their wives. Was this command given because of a cultural, patriarchal understanding of men and women? Or was this based on how God created us? In other words, our God-created differences, are they just biological? Or is Paul actually speaking here based on the created order when he says, hey, husbands, give them what they need, which is love, and wives, give them what they need, which is respect. And of course, Melissa, do women need respect?
Yeah, but I think Emerson, I like the way he said it. We both need love and respect. But it's the idea of the felt need.
Mm-hmm. And is this felt need based on nature or nurture? In other words, we know that in the first century when Paul was writing, it was a patriarchal society. Women were considered second-class citizens, and there was this idea that women are the servant. And so a lot of people take offense when they read Paul, when they see that he's saying that women should submit or respect. He uses those two words in Ephesians 5. And some people have said, you know what, this is just based on culture. Paul was writing this because that was the culture of his day. And so one of the questions we need to ask as we go through this journey together, is this something that Paul was speaking based on the created order? Or was this just a reflection of his culture? I'd love to hear from some of you in our comments on that question. Is that question clear? Some of you that are listening online, I'd love to get some feedback. I think that this is an important question to answer as we go through this, because the whole seminar, the whole conference is based on this very passage in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33. Now, I don't know how you're going to answer it, but I'll tell you this. In our married experience, in our marriage life, we found this to be true. We found it to be true. Now, I need to treat her with respect, and I love to be loved by her. She's a caring person, attentive to details, and she just pours love into our whole family, kids and me, and I love that. But when I feel disrespected, that's when I respond negatively. So what Paul says in Ephesians 5:33, and as Egrix unpacks it, it has just so met our experience. And
I think it's important to maybe explain the idea of felt need. So if you were disrespectful to me, then I would feel like you don't love me. Like if you act disrespectful towards me, I think I would feel like you don't love me.
Yep.
And so in the same way that I'm not sure how it goes the other way. I guess it works the other way too. But it's that felt need of what you feel like you need.
Well, yeah. If you deprive us of love, if you deprive me as a husband of love, it would be, in my book, a lack of respect for me as a person, a contempt for me as a person. Let's say you say, you know what, I'm going to stop cooking for this man because he's, not worthy and he's whatever. That attitude of depriving me of whatever you do, needs, that would be interpreted as disrespect. And again, part of this is culture. Part of it is culture, It's like in the culture I was raised in, there was this expectation that the wife does certain things, and it's not necessarily biblical, right?
Right.
In the Brazilian culture, which is very patriarchal, there are some expectations that are very ingrained in the culture. So anyways, these are some interesting questions for us to consider as we go through. Again, tomorrow, her needs, unconditional love. His needs, unconditional respect. You can take a little peek at where we're going by looking at sessions 2 and 3 in your workbook. That's what we'll be covering in tomorrow's 11:30 session. And then session 3 in the afternoon, breaking the crazy cycle. So thank you for coming tonight and tuning in. Yeah.
I just want to remind us, everyone, that I think it's helpful to go through those discussion questions. And, we've shared some stories in our marriage where we feel like we've had some crazy cycles. We've shared very little tonight, but I think it's good for every couple to think through their conflicts and their issues and see if some of this could be also applicable to your lives and in what way. So you got to do a lot of personal couple searching, I think that would be beneficial.
We're on a journey together. Melissa and I have only been married 13 years. We were talking this afternoon and kind of feel unworthy to lead out in this kind of conference, only being married 13 years. Really, it's EGRIX that is leading out, and we're facilitators. We're sharing some of our experiences because we want you to know that we're struggling also in this. This is a journey that we're all in together. Don't be fooled by Facebook. Don't be fooled by appearances. Every marriage, no matter how healthy and thriving they may be, there are moments where one feels like their needs are not being met. And it does set off some negative responses. It's how we handle that that makes the difference. And so we're simply sharing a resource with you, those of you that are here and tuning in online. And we're excited to be able to do this because we really believe this has been a blessing in our lives. And we know that marriages have been transformed through this material. You may not agree with everything that EGRIX teaches, but I'll tell you, do some reflection. There are some principles that are going to be addressed tomorrow. We're going to be talking about taking responsibility for our response regardless of how the other one is behaving. That's a powerful message. It's a biblical message. And it's one that we can only really live through the power of His Spirit. So we're going to end with prayer tonight. Melissa, why don't you pray for us as we close?
Kind Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for your word. It is so full of gems of truth that help us in all aspects of our lives. And Lord, you know that all of us can use your help in our marriages. Some of us have stronger marriages, some of us have weaker marriages, but in all cases we want to grow more like Christ. We want to have more of your Spirit and more of your guidance in each one of our marriage. So I pray that you would guide us, open our eyes to how this material can help us to love and respect each other better and reflect to the world what your word can do in lives. And we thank you for these things in Christ's name.
Amen.